Anyway, Krystal, what are you taking a look at today?
Well, one of the big questions we like to explore on this show is exactly what long-term shifts to our politics, our culture, our habits, and our communities will result from what we all lived through this last year, from the pandemic itself to our government's woefully inadequate response to what the whole experience exposed about our fake economy, self-serving media outlets, and the politicians who make it their entire job to protect the plutocrat class. So as the pandemic winds down, at least here in this country, we're just starting to get little indications of what the long-term impacts will be. Whether it's the insane housing market asset grab by permanent capital, whether it's working class Americans engaging in a low-key general strike of retail and restaurant work, or the affluent professional class refusing to go back to their cubicles. Well, we just got another little glimpse of how the pandemic has accelerated a shift in our attitudes about one of the bedrock assumptions that have ruled our politics over the past 60 years, let's say at least. That capitalism is good and socialism is evil, and that's all you need to know. Take a look at this poll here from Axios. So over the last 2 years, positive sentiments towards socialism jumped up while more people soured on capitalism. Most of that shift happened among younger Americans, which makes some sense since this is a group that has been routinely screwed over by capitalism and also has had less Cold War propaganda drummed into them relentlessly throughout their lifetimes. So here are some of the relevant numbers. In 2019, 58% of Americans ages 18 to 34 reacted positively to the word capitalism. That's plunged to 49% today. Meanwhile, the numbers for socialism have improved significantly among certain demographic groups. 60% of Black Americans have a positive view of socialism. That number was only 53% just 2 years ago. 45% of American women have a positive view of socialism as compared to just 41% in the last survey. And even 33%, a third, of non-white Republicans have a positive view of socialism as compared to 27% 2 years ago. Did you catch that? Women and Black Americans are leading the charge in terms of favorable views of socialism, which is, of course, the polar opposite of the white brocialist stereotype we have all been fed. That, of course, is a caricature offered in bad faith by neoliberals looking to use weaponized identity attacks as a way to undermine redistributive policies. This poll also reveals that for Americans under 35, views of capitalism and socialism are essentially split. They're 50-50. Only 2 years ago, capitalism enjoyed a 20-point advantage in this same survey. Among Gen Z, the numbers are even more stark. Capitalism is a full 12 points underwater at this point. Looking at all this data, you can't help but come to a few conclusions. First of all, the politics of younger Americans, they look a whole lot different than their parents. And second, no well-crafted messaging or popular politician could have possibly moved Americans nearly as effectively as what they experienced and witnessed with their own eyes this past year. What's interesting here, too, is that the shifts in views towards capitalism and socialism were determined much more by age than by partisanship. In other words, quite a few young Republicans soured on capitalism this past year as well. 56% of Republicans under 35 say that the government should work to reduce the wealth gap, and the number of young Republicans with a positive view of capitalism, that dropped from 81% down to 66%. Now, while older Americans, they haven't moved nearly as much, they still overwhelmingly prefer that the government work to reduce inequality as opposed to focusing on deregulation. So, while they might be turned off by the socialist label, there's clearly a widely shared consensus around reforming the current version of American late-stage capitalism. So, it all makes a lot of sense, really. Think about what we've seen this past year. As shutdowns commenced and people lost their jobs, the stock market was automatically bailed out to the tune of trillions of dollars. Regular Americans, meanwhile, they were left to hope that our corrupt political class would stop arguing over whether or not masks worked and actually get around to doing a damn thing to protect them. Industries, they got custom bailouts written by lobbyists, while most Americans were kicked to the rickety unemployment system. We have just learned that half of the 64.3 million Americans who sought unemployment insurance payments never got them because the system was so broken. We watched lawmakers get rich, trading stocks that, just happened to surge thanks to government pandemic programs. We saw the dual screen specter of breadlines for the many, even as the stock market reached new unprecedented heights. And perhaps most of all, we saw billionaires like Jeff Bezos and the rest of the American monopolists and financial royalists gain trillions of dollars in new wealth at the expense of workers, small business, and the vitality of our communities. Now, As traumatized workers gingerly re-enter the workforce, politicians were quick to force their hand by cutting those unemployment benefits, while Biden's promises of a $15 minimum wage that could make that work worthwhile, those have completely disappeared. Now, you can certainly understand why quite a few Americans took a look at all of this and said, if this is capitalism, I want nothing to do with it. Frankly, the story of this past year is really the story of America over the past, let's say, 40 years, only set to triple speed. The corruption, the ever-consolidating wealth, the power of the few, the bailouts that protect the too big to fail while treating workers like disposable pawns, the rigged system making a mockery of the idea that everyone's got a shot at success. It's just this time, rather than being like the frog put in a pot where the water is slowly increased to the boiling point, Americans were just thrown right into that boiling water all at once, and they saw very, very clearly what was being done to them. So what will the consequences be? Well, it could be a new paradigm in politics, with cross-partisan efforts to check monopolists, to lift wages, to reinvigorate the labor movement and experiment even with worker ownership. Or, we could just argue about Dr. Seuss and Potato Head instead, while plutocrats happily survey the landscape of sectarian conflict from their new pandemic-purchased yachts. And it kind of ties in with what you... Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.